I am live. I'm reading A Vacation, a book by Joan Marshall Grant. It was dedicated to her dad. I just saw that here, with love to Dad, my father. To my father with love, that's what she actually says. It was published in 1947. She was a far memory writer, but this is a book about her journey through France with Charles in 1946. This was published 1947. We are here at chapter 12. Saone. Saone, I think it's a place. I don't know, Saone it's called. On the way back to Thoissey, we decided to find a secluded place to sunbathe, for it was magnificently hot. Near yet another blown bridge, we saw a track leading to the water and decided to take the car down the steep bank. It was even steeper than it looked, and Charles wondered if we should get up again without grounding the crankcase. We bumped over the grass until we reached a gap in the reeds which crowded the bank. For an hour we lay naked in the sun and felt it soaking gently into our bones. Then Charles decided to bathe, and I hesitantly accompanied him. He had trunks bought in Macon, but as the only female bathing dress cost 4,000 francs, and I was made of hideous yellow crochet, I had announced my intention of swimming without one, if at all. Charles seems incapable of doing anything without a specific objective. He walks only to reach a destination, swims to cross the river or round a buoy, dives to discover whether the highest board is too high. He announced his intention of swimming across the river, although the Saone at this point must have been nearly half a mile wide. Oh, it's a river. I attempted to reason with him, though from long experience I should have known better. He swam about near the bank until he had seen me thoroughly immersed, and then struck out for midstream. Beyond the reeds I saw a solitary fisherman, who with tact pretended not to notice me. I swam nonchalantly past him. He hastily reeled in his line and began to row upstream, where he anchored again at a discreet distance. I was getting cold and increasingly anxious, so I again picked my way through the reeds, mud squelching between my frigid toes, and wrapped myself in a towel. In the far distance I could see Charles' head, or was it only flotsam, and he had already drowned? No, it was Charles, apparently floating or treading water and drifting downstream on the current. I knew the current was strong, for I had watched it swirling past the broken piers of the bridge. I hesitated. Should I try to swim out to him or call the fisherman? If Charles was really drowning, we should never reach him in time, and if he was all right, and I tried to reassure myself, of course he was all right, he would be furious at my making an idiot of myself and of him. He had begun to swim again, obliquely across the current to avoid being carried too far down. Evidently, he had decided that the last 100 yards were not necessary to his act, for he was on his way back. I watched him with decreasing tension until he was clearly visible and obviously still swimming strongly. Then I lay down and pretended to be asleep. He was tired but not exhausted, and admitted that if the river had not been at dead low water, the current might have been awkward. He dried himself and then slept until I had to wake him, because the sun was setting and it was getting chilly. It was then that he discovered he had water in his ears. Chapter 13. Quiet Weekend. We were alone in the restaurant that evening, and conversation languished, for Charles was deaf with Saone water, an affliction which at that time we both thought would automatically cure itself. We heard a car and saw a new delage, garish with chromium, sweep up to the steps. A couple entered and were given the table next to ours. Charles could see them, but not hear their conversation. I could hear, but not see, without pointedly pointedly turning round. She must have been nearly 40, with an elaborate blonde pompadour and stone-grey eyes, both in colour and hardness, and she wore a black and white tweed suit decorated with black velvet. He was much younger and talked rather too loud. I did not listen to their conversation until I heard her indignant protest on his ordering white wine instead of champagne. Je suis la première de la maison, she said angrily, and it was suddenly obvious to what kind of house she referred. From then on I could not help listening, occasionally making a pointless remark in English to reassure them that we could not understand. Fortunately, though, my French is strange and free from grammatical constraint. I can understand it sufficiently well, especially when stimulated by interest. 10 years of being talked at by a series of French governesses must have left a lasting impression on my subconscious. Charles, having realized the theme of the conversation, which to him was almost entirely inaudible, suffered agonies of curiosity, but patiently sipped 2 lots of coffee, which provided our excuse to remain at the table. It transpired that the young man had brought the lady from Lyon for the weekend, the price paid to the madame being 5,000 francs. She proceeded to explain that for this initial sum he could not expect anything except compliance, which no doubt he would find excessively boring. However, they could reach a satisfactory financial arrangement. She would be delighted to extend his education. 50 francs by 50 francs, the bargaining progressed, until they reached amicable agreement at 1,750. He then, rather plaintively, asked what he might expect for such a large bonus. With startling vividness, she proceeded to explain. I regret that the details are not suitable for publication. Sufficient that numbers 1 to 6 were fully documented, but number 7, her speciality, could be learned only after the preliminaries had been successfully concluded in sequence. Anxiously he inquired whether number 7 and perhaps number 6 also might wait until he was fortified with breakfast. At this she unleashed a torrent of indignation. It was obvious he did not know the elementary etiquette, that he had never moved in decent society, that he was a boor and a parvenu. He stammered apologies, obviously as mystified as I was myself. As though explaining to a child, she told him that by her professional code, from 8 to 8 her time was her own, during which it would be an unforgivable breach of manners even to kiss her hand. Apparently, Madame Blanc had also overheard sufficient of their conversation, for instead of letting them have a room, she sent them away to seek another in the Villefranche. So I finished this here. Chapter 14 is called Formal Call. Have a lovely Wednesday, 18th of December.